Hello. Hi, everybody. I am Molly Moran. I'm the owner of Table Wine, and tonight is all about sherry. So we are going to get to know it. If you are joining us live, I think most folks have filled out the poll, but if you're joining us live and you haven't yet filled out the poll, please do so. It's 2 quick questions, and it just gives me a sense of how much familiarity you have with sherry, and then kind of where the group's vibe is on sweet wines. So far, it's a very solid group of people who are okay with sweet wines with the right food or mood or occasion or whatnot, which I suppose is probably why you're taking this class, because you aren't afraid of sweet wine. You probably wouldn't take this class if you were afraid of it. So I was just curious if there's anybody out there who was being brave, dipping their toe in the sweet wine waters. So as always, please use the chat. We've got a lot of hellos, which hello. If you're watching live, I love the chat, and we're gonna, use it as always to talk about what you're tasting and smelling and any questions that you have as we go. If you are not watching this live and you're watching the recording, I will do my best to repeat back any kind of relevant comments that are in the chat so that you can kind of follow along as we go, because this is how we interact these days. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. I'm really excited, guys. I love sherry so much, and I've never actually taught a class devoted entirely to it. I've taught classes about the whole bucket of fortified wines, but not sherry specifically. So this is really exciting for me. And it's one of the last classes I'm going to teach in 2021. So thank you so much for being here. There is blind tasting class in a few weeks for Small Business Saturday, if you're not already signed up for that. And that will be the last wine class, I think, of 2021. We might do some other fun wine events, but I think that'll be the last official class. So it looks like some folks it looks like some people have had sherry at some time in their life, but then a couple folks have never had it at all. So here we go. Let's dive in and learn about sherry. So sherry is, as I mentioned, one of the fortified wine groups. What makes it special, or kind of what sets it apart, is that it has to come from Jerez, Spain. It has to come from Andalusia, is kind of the larger region. It has to come from this specific place, like Champagne, basically. It's not as regulated. I do believe that there are wineries that make sherries. Maybe they call it sherry still. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I think maybe they've gotten away from that. I think there was a point where people were still using the word sherry, but now you have to actually be from Jerez. There are a wide variety of styles. We're going to taste 3 of them. The dry styles of sherry are all made from a grape called Palomino. And then the sweet styles are made from grapes, either Pedro Ximenez or Moscatel. We are going to have a really special, it's called Especial, but we're going to have a very special Moscatel to end our tasting tonight. So those are the sweet styles. With the sweet styles, you tend to see the grape name on the bottle, whereas with the dry styles, you don't see the name Palomino, because it's more about the style of sherry and less the grape itself, because they're all made from Palomino. The bucket of fortified wines, if you're not familiar with what that means, it means that they are made like regular wines, and at some point during the fermentation process, they have a neutral spirit added to them. So in the case of sherries, that fortified spirit is added at the end of fermentation, and it's what causes the alcohol level to be a little bit higher. So if you look at what you have, I assume you all have some sherry in front of you. Maybe you don't, but if you have any sherries in front of you, look at them. The driest one, the Fino, is 15%. The Amontillado that we're having is 18.5%. And then the Muscatel is 17.5%. So they're not I don't know, Riesling. They're not like they're not pet nats. They're not like at 8%. So keep that in mind as you're drinking. They are boozy. They have, actual booze added to them. I'm not going to talk at length about why fortified wines exist. I will say that fortification allows them to last a longer period of time and allowed them to travel, which is why so many of the fortified wines in the world are from port places, because that's where shipping was happening. And so that's where wines were coming from. The other thing that makes sherry special, there are a lot of things that make sherry special, but the other thing that makes sherry unique is that they are made with what is called the Solera system. So unlike pretty much any other wine ever, in the sherry houses, they have barrels of older sherry that they then add to new sherry. So they're kind of always rotating. There's not like just a barrel of brand new, let's say 2021. There's not just here's the barrel from 2021 and here's the barrel from 2020. It's like in that 2020 barrel is some of the 19, 18, 17, and all the way on back. Some of the smaller producers, including the one that we're going to start with, really pride themselves on having like a century of Solera sherry, so that they're kind of always adding this little bit of the past to the current wine. It's really cool. Like it's from, as I just said that, like that's kind of romantic, I think. But it also serves a purpose in consistency of style. So the El Maestro Sierra sherries taste the same. It's not about the vintage. It's about like, okay, I know that I really like El Maestro Sierra's style, or I really like Lustau's style, and I can get to like know it, and I know it, and I know that it's always what I want. There's a comment that it sounds like sourdough, and it's just like sourdough. It's exactly, if you've ever made sourdough bread where you're using a little bit of the starter to feed the next batch, and then you take that and that becomes your starter, and on and on and on. That's exactly it. And like sourdough, it has wild yeasts. It has these yeasty, bready flavors, which again is kind of just like why I get all excited and do this with my hands, because I love it so much. So if you take away nothing else from tonight, remembering the Solera system is really kind of the thing that makes sherry sherry. You don't need to know the names of the grapes. You don't need to know that, kind of more of the details that we were talking about, but like knowing what the Solera system is very useful. And then there are other wines that people use the Solera system with other wines, because look at how cool it is in sherry. So you might hear it from time to time. This is just a map to kind of give you a sense of where we are in Spain. We are in southwestern Spain, way down in the corner there. Very, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Like, cool winds blowing from the Atlantic, close to the sea, very temperate, lovely climate. And that will come into play shortly. So here are two other important things about sherry before we start. There are two main groups of sherry that undergo at least one, if not two, really interesting processes while they're aging. So there's the group of sherries that are what they call biologically aged. So what that means is that they are aged in some sort of vessel that is not filled to the brim. So with the rest of wine, most wines, you're going to fill that barrel or that tank, and you don't want there to be air getting into the wine. Sherry is different. So in some capacity, the biologically aged wines will be aged where they're not full. They might even be aged in an open vat, like literally where the top is open so that cool sea air can blow in. And what that brings with it, it brings salt, actual salt with it, and it brings wild yeasts. So then there's this film of yeast that develops on the top, and it can end up being about like 2 inches thick. And it's called flor, F-L-O-R. And it's the terminology is it's aged under flor. So it's like this cap of yeast, and then all the wine is fermenting underneath. So the two styles that is used in are Fino and Manzanilla. Those are the two. So we're going to drink Fino, and I can briefly talk about Manzanilla at the time. The other option is an oxidative process. So either that sherry also ages under flor for a period of time, and then the flor literally sinks. It's done its job. There's no more sugars. It goes down to the bottom. Or, and then they let the wine age, exposing it to oxygen purposefully. They want it to do that. They want those kind of nutty, oxygenated flavors. That's like a lot of dried fruit and stuff like that. Or it might not be aged under flor at all, but it is oxygenated. It is oxidized. And so it can go either way. So those styles are the Amontillado that we're going to try, the Moscatel Especial that we're going to try. I put on here Oloroso. That would be another style of sherry that's sweeter than Amontillado, but not as sweet as our Moscatel Especial. So it's a lot of info. Let me know if you have questions, if any of that's not sinking in. But I'm going to kind of keep coming back to this information as we taste through each of the styles. So with that said, are there any fundamental beginning questions? How do they keep the flor alive for biological aging? Is that related to the adding of fresh wine? No, so the flor it like eventually becomes 2 inches deep. Like it's just yeast that's attracted to the wine, and it keeps it's eating the sugars in the wine, and that's kind of what it's doing. And then when it reaches the point that the winemakers are content with the sugars having been fermented out, then they'll add the spirit to it. In the case of Fino, that's when they add the spirit, and that kills the flor. It kills the process. Any other questions? You guys didn't know that you were getting like so much information. Sherry's like, a nerd's dream. It is one of the reasons that like I think wine people gravitate towards sherry, because there's so much to learn and really nerd out about. Okay. If there aren't questions, let's do Fino. So Fino sherry, if you've not had, I know that Katya and Drew said they've never had sherry before, and so they can't wait. Well, here you go. So here is, I won't say that this is this isn't like more sherry than the rest of them, but I feel like Fino sherry is just such a unique taste experience and smell experience. So I'm very excited for those of you who've never had a Fino sherry before to get to try it. So what you'll notice with Finos typically, yeastiness, breadiness, some sort of tang. Sourdough is totally a legit tasting note. Saline, as I mentioned, these are aged where they purposely do want the salt to come in, so it might actually be salty. Nuttiness kind of carries through with all sherries, but nuttiness tends to be a little bit more obvious in the slightly drier styles. And then sometimes citrus notes, orange, lemon, those kinds of things. As I mentioned, Fino is aged entirely under flor. It is the driest style. It is Fino and Manzanilla are exactly the same in terms of like how dry they are. The main difference between the two styles and why we're not going to taste a manzanilla tonight is manzanilla just comes from a specific town further west within that big region. I say big region, it's a small region, but within that region, manzanilla has to come from closer to the coast. And so they tend to be even lighter and even more delicate. But Fino is still like a really beautiful place to kind of start. So I'm really curious to hear what you all smell and taste. Again, if you've never had sherry, it's a smell sensation. It's so different than a lot of things that you might have ever smelled before in your life. The food pairings there, Fino is traditionally the thing that you have at 4 or 5. It's your happy hour drink. It's your aperitif. You have this and you have some salty snacks of some kind, olives or Marcona almonds or, cheese, that kind of thing. It is phenomenal with potato chips. I don't know if anybody has chips on hand, but the smell is much stronger than the taste. Not sure we like the taste. Okay. Going for the chips. Go for the chips. I'd be really curious to see if it changes because Fino really is thought of as, they all actually work very nicely with food, but Fino is really kind of the gourmand sherry. So it is, it's kind of meant to be with food. The El Maestro Sierra, I do want to hear what y'all are thinking. You're just being quiet, so I'm going to chat about the winery. El Maestro Sierra is on its 4th generation of a woman at the helm, which I think is kind of awesome because it's called El Maestro, but it's named that because the person who founded the winery was like the master cooper in Jerez. He made all the barrels for everybody. And so he then started the winery, and now they're on their 4th generation of amazing women making sherry. And that's pretty recent. In 2020, the 3rd generation passed away after having led the winery for almost 50 years. So, okay, let's see. I get lots of citrusy notes in the smell and taste. I agree. I totally agree. I get like a preserved lemon, like a salty lemon kind of thing. Are the chips good because you fill your mouth with salt? Absolutely. Yep. It mimics the saltiness. Salty foods really like some saltiness in the wine. So that's why it pairs so nicely. I think I need warm sunset and more tapas to pair with this. I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. A comment in the room is it tastes like basement, but the household is split. One of us likes the basement taste, apparently. And apparently whoever likes the basement taste is not the person typing. Just going to say there seems to be a little judgment there. Eating olives brings out the saltiness. The chips give the Fino a sweeter finish. We like it much better. Awesome. Super awesome. I'm really, really glad to hear it. And I'm glad you gave it a chance. Katya and Drew are saying that they agree on the citrus, not super fruity overall. Not at all, right? It is all about, you picked up on olive, right? I think it smells like green olives. It definitely, biscuit is one of their words. I think that it's like olives and bread and salt and all that kind of non-fruity stuff. Though I do feel like there's a lemon peel in there. I do feel like there's a little, one of the things I do really like about, I like all of them, but one of the things that I like about Fino sherry is it almost feels like a cocktail to me. Like it's so unusual and it's such a different mix of flavors and aromas that it doesn't really necessarily remind me of wine right away. It kind of feels more cocktaily. I'm curious what the taste like basement thing though is. That is unusual to me because usually basement is corked wines, wines that have cork taint, smell or taste like a wet basement. And this is obviously can't have had that because it's a screw cap. So I'm curious what the basementiness is. If that's kind of like what the rest of us are kind of picking up on as I don't know, the more savory saline quality to it. I don't know. I don't know what your basement smells like. If your basement smells this good, there's a mustiness. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, the briny mustiness, I think that's totally fair. Yeah. That kind of yeasty. But it's not like brewer's yeast or it's not like that sweet smell of a brewery. It's like it's a little tangier, a little wilder than that. I feel like I'm drinking a diluted liquor. Yeah, right? Because you kind of are. Right? There was a neutral brandy added to this, like an unaged brandy. That was added to it. So you really are. I can really taste it on the very, very tip of the tongue, a super shallow sip. What is it on in that sentence? The basement taste, I see. I got it. Okay, we're there. Definitely want to try with anchovies in some form. Yes. Also, there's more acid than I was expecting. Yeah, so Fino is definitely brighter than other sherries. It's super bone dry, and I think that the acid comes through. And then also El Maestro Sierra goes for that style, like an elegant, food-friendly style. That's kind of their house style. So that lens that's coming from that Solera system, right? Where I can say their house style. And then like, that's going to be true of El Maestro Sierra Fino that you taste 20 years from now. And it would have been true, if you had tasted this 20 years before. One of the not so awesome parts of Fino is that it doesn't last as long once you open it as some of the others. So the sweeter the wine, the longer it lasts. So Fino is really only good for, my God, if you read, I was double checking kind of like my rule of thumb, and people are like within 1 to 2 days. And I'm like, come on, guys. I have regular wine that I drink for more than just 1 to 2 days. But I would say that you're going to want to drink this one rather quickly. If it is not something that you are like really jiving on, consider cooking with it. You could use it in the place of white wine. If it's not, again, if it's not your jam. I'd say get yourself some salty snacks if you don't already have salty snacks, and pretend that you're in Madrid and have Spanish night and have a lot of fun with it. And don't just cook with it, but just so that you're looking at maybe a week or two with Fino. It's not going to be great forever. It's one of the reasons that, and actually all of them, that the bottles are really dark because they don't want any light damage, any damage of any kind to the wines. I think that's everything I wanted to say about that. Did you guys, I guess there's kind of, we're a split group. I'm not going to ask because I think it's pretty apparent. Is there anybody who downright spit it out and won't drink it again? Just curious. And which would be like super ironic, can I just say, because this class, I was convinced that people were going to not sign up for this class because it was going to be about sweet wine. And so it would be ironic to me if it's really the dry wine that keeps people away. Tried it with saltines, not as good with the chips. Maybe it's the fat content. It is also the actual like way that we can perceive saltiness. Saltines don't, they actually like dry your mouth out. The cracker part dries your mouth out more, whereas chips don't. So that can be part of it. I do think that the fat is probably a part of it as well. But it's more about like how salty potato chips feel to us. Kaja says she wouldn't spit it out, but she also wouldn't choose to drink it again. That's totally fair. That is great. If you find yourself in Spain ever, or you're just, I don't know, you go to a Spanish restaurant or something like that, you now know that you don't really like the super dry style. And again, manzanilla is going to be really similar. It's just going to be slightly more delicate, even though I think this is really pretty delicate. So just don't go after that style. Like, just, that's not what you want. Okay, great. Should we move on? Let's do it. Okay. So El Maestro Sierra, before we leave it, one last thing I was going to say that they are 4th generation. They're very, very small producer. And they're one of the ones who have like a backlog of old sherries for their Solera system, because they're the first to kind of say it, because they're not super popular. Like, they were like, we're not like super famous. We're not Tio Pepe, we're not like everybody's grocery store brand of sherry. So they really pride themselves on how old their Solera system is. And Kristen and Patty mentioned that their PX is the best. PX is the abbreviation for Pedro Ximenez, which is one of the sweeter styles, which does remind me of the thing that I was like, there was one thing I wanted to say before we left it. If you don't like this, think of it as you don't like Fino, not like you don't like this winery. And I don't think that any of you would think otherwise, but just worth mentioning, right? Just thinking of it like, okay, I don't like Grenache, but I know I like Pinot Noir, right? Like, just treat it as like, that's the part that it's not your jam. So just in case you needed that plug. Okay. So I mentioned that, that El Maestro Sierra is a really small producer. Lustau is one of the larger sherry producers. They're not in the huge like mass production group of things, but they are kind of larger. So if there was one winery that I thought maybe some folks might know, maybe it's Lustau. So the deal with Amontillado, you're going to pick up again on those nut notes, more herbaceous things like tobacco, like general herbiness. Amontillados are aged in barrel longer, whereas Fino is a fresher style. Amontillado is aged, and so you can get some of those like actual toasty oak notes. Again, that's kind of where the tobacco comes in. You might get leather, those kinds of things. Almost like charred wood, like like a bourbon barrel, like that caramelized wood kind of thing, that can come out as well. Amontillado starts out as Fino or Manzanilla. So it begins just like our Fino did, under floor. And then they add the spirit to it, and it ages without floor to oxidize. So it is a little bit of both. Technically, Amontillado is still on the dry side. So it is a drier style. Americans, apparently, we apparently like our Amontillados with just a hint of sweetness. So they are often sweetened up ever so slightly for export, which I did not know. So our Fino was our pre-meal wine, and our Amontillado is our meal wine. It is our dinner wine. It goes with roasted meats of any and all variety. It goes with, I put on here hazelnut crusted trout. It could be really any sort of nut crusted protein of your choice, right? Whether that's all, that's hazelnut pork tenderloin or almonds and trout or whatever, whatever kind of thing is your jam. Caramelized onions on a pizza with pasta, that kind of thing. Amontillado is super flexible. So give it a swirl. Let me know what you think. Amontillado is also a a favorite ingredient of many serious bartenders, of many mixologist types. They love Amontillado. It gives a nuttiness to a cocktail in a way that, say, like a creme de noyau or some, like a nut liqueur isn't going to do. It's going to be too sweet. There aren't that many nutty things that you can add to drinks, and so people really love Amontillado for that reason. I'm curious what y'all think. I haven't had this wine in so long, and this was the first sherry I ever had at a restaurant that no longer exists. I don't know if any of you remember Cocolico. Does anybody remember Cocolico? It was a little spot up off the square where I learned all about sherry. Less acid, question mark. Yes. Yes, I agree. Yep. It's not quite as mouthwatering. It's not as bone dry either. Definitely more nutty over citrus, and Patty's getting some cigar aromas. Yeah, I totally feel that. Yeah. Similar but deeper smell, more immediately enjoyable than the Fino. I agree with you. I think that the Fino is an acquired taste. An Amontillado to me is the, like, I don't know, gateway drug. It's the like, yeah, it's easy. It's just easy to enjoy. Kristen and Patty are commenting on the more body and texture. I agree. I'm really loving the texture. I don't really remember that about this wine, but I love the way it feels. So different from the Fino. Katya likes this significantly more. We're both getting maple and a little cherry, still the salty vibe. Yeah, for sure, right? Like I said, it starts out as Fino, so there's no getting away from that. One of the coolest things I've ever had a chance to partake in was a Lustau tasting, because Lustau makes a super wide variety. A lot of the sherry houses do make a variety of sherries, but Lustau is like comprehensive. They make like all of the different sherries. And I got to taste from their Fino to their sweetest and really see kind of like the through lines with them, which is really cool. Cameron and Danielle mentioned that it reminds them of a less boozy brandy. Speaking of that, we have a table wine. If you need a brandy for the holidays, we have a brandy from Lustau that is aged in these casks. It is so delicious. It is just ridiculously good. And it's like quite affordable. Yeah, totally sold. It's stupidly good. It's really great. Mike is saying the tobacco leather notes come from more from the taste than the smell. Okay. So you're picking up more on the palate than the nose. Great. If that's true for you, go for it. I kind of feel like it's on both for me. I feel like I smell it and taste it. I'm glad that I'm selling brandy, guys. We also have vermouth from Lustau. That is amazing as well. So just heads up, I love Lustau products. Speaking of the sherry barrels, just reminded me, if you've ever, I don't know how many of you are whiskey drinkers. I know some of you are whiskey drinkers. It's not uncommon because sherry houses go through all of these barrels, right? They have the Solera system. They age these wines for so long. They have a lot of barrels. Now, often they reuse them, but there is a tendency to have kind of a backlog of barrels at sherry houses. So whiskey distilleries sometimes work with a sherry house and will age their whiskeys in sherry barrels. Which can be such a cool experience because you get some of these nutty and citrus aromas, flavors, and then, kind of like the leather picks up on both the whiskey part and then the barrel part. And so it's really cool. So if you like that, and they also tend to add a little bit, sherry barrel aging tends to add a little bit of sweetness to your whiskey. So I do like them. So just a heads up, there are quite a few Scotch distillers that do that. So you can kind of be on the lookout for that. Mike is saying vermouth is another style you'd like to try. Absolutely. I love vermouth so much. The only thing that's going to keep me from, like, I guess I would do a fortified wine class again and talk through all of the different styles. Or maybe when we're in person again, I would do vermouth as a class. I just feel bad sticking you all with a lot of open, weird wine. Like, I just am like, I don't know. What are people going to do with that much vermouth? Maybe you'd drink it. I would drink it, but TBD. Maybe we'll do that. Patty just pulled out his bottle of Macallan 12-year, and it says exclusively matured in selected sherry oak casks from Jerez, Spain. Yes. That's what makes Macallan 12-year so great. Drew wants this as his Thanksgiving dinner beverage. Yes, that is why I scheduled this class for right now. Last year at this time, we did Beaujolais, and we did Gamay, and we did light-bodied reds, and they were all perfect for Thanksgiving. And I was like, well, I want to do something interesting. I don't want to just like do the same thing that we did last year. What's something that goes really well with Thanksgiving that would be completely unexpected? And I was like, sherry. Sherry would be so great. So you could have this on hand with salty snacks. If it's not your vibe or you know your people and they're like, no way, that's just too weird. Great. Skip that part. Have Amontillado with dinner. It would be so great. It's so great with roasted meats. And like, you know, they're nutty dishes often on your Thanksgiving table. So yeah, I'm all for it. I mentioned that Fino doesn't last super long in this fridge. Amontillado lasts a little bit longer. So again, the wine professionals say like 2 to 3 weeks. I think that you can get away with a bit longer than that. It's already oxidized. So, you know, you're not going to be like ruining it in that way. The biggest thing is that like it starts to kind of oxidize too much and turns to vinegar. So in case you're wondering what do I mean when I say bad, don't drink vinegar. Don't do it. I do think that in 3 weeks when it's Thanksgiving, this will still be tasting absolutely delicious, and you can enjoy it then if you still have any left. So that's good. Questions about that? Questions about Amontillado? I have the itchiest nose. I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know why I'm apologizing. I feel like we're in person, but we're not. And so I can scratch my nose and it's okay. Questions? Thoughts? Okay. We're going to go on. Look at this. Okay, great. I'm so excited. I'm just revisiting the poll. And everybody said that they are up for sweet wines at least sometime. Maybe that time is now. Let's find out together. Okay, so here's the deal. This is Moscatel Especial. It is a unique style. It is not something that a lot of sherry makers make necessarily. So you might see Moscatel. Moscatel is the name of the grape, and it is a synonym of muscat or Moscato. Don't get scared. It's going to be okay. It's going to be great. So Moscatel is the Spanish name for muscat. So if you have ever had a Moscato or a Muscat, you know that they tend to be very floral in aroma, and that they tend to have some kind of citrus notes to them. So if this were a normal Moscatel sherry, we'd be talking about kind of like staying in that lane. We'd be like, yep, it's going to be floral and it's going to be citrusy, and that's where we're going to go. This wine is a very unique, you can't be very unique, sorry. It's a unique style. So it is made, it is not aged under floor at all. It is just a purely oxidized style. They make the wine, they age it, they ferment it and they age it, and then they add what is called arrob. It is like a syrup that is made by boiling muscatel must. So when they press the muscatel grapes, the stuff that's left over, the skins and the seeds and all that stuff is the must. And so then they boil it and they make this syrup called a rope, and it is aged in its own separate Solera system. This is a super ancient way of making wine. It goes back to the Phoenicians being in Spain. It's a really, really old way of trying to keep the wine from getting bacterial and getting bacteria. I was going to say infection. So it's really old. It's very rare. It's very time consuming, as you might expect, right? They're going to take all the spent grape stuff and then they're going to boil it and then they're going to age it and they're going to do the Solera system for that. And then they're going to add it to their sherry. It's time consuming. It's not necessarily something that people are really interested in doing. Cesar Florida, on the other hand, is very interested in doing it. He is a master of Muscatel. He is fourth generation as well. And I think maybe the fourth actual Cesar Florida to helm the winery. So it's special. It's different. And so I really wanted you to have it. We've carried his other Muscatel, Dorado, which is kind of the more traditional style. We've carried that before. I think some of you might have had it in the sherry class that I didn't teach a long time ago, a couple years ago. So here you go. Food pairing perspective. It's dessert-ish time, right? It is sweet. And so it's going to be better with sweet things, like a tarte tatin, like salted caramel ice cream, because it has some of those caramely notes. Gingerbread, you could definitely do it with pumpkin pie. It could go with an ooey gooey soft ripe cheese. That's like such a great combination of sweet and tangy. That can be like a really unexpected pairing if you're feeling salty. The must reminded me of grappa. Is that similar? Yes, it is similar. So grappa is made from the pumice. The same kind of process. Yeah. Notice a grape jelly smell and taste. Interesting. Interesting. I get that. I'm there. I wasn't there at first sniff, but I'm there now. I feel that. I think if you know that it's Moscato, or you like have Moscato in your mind, I feel like you can kind of get to like, oh yeah, it's kind of that same wildflower honeysuckle thing, but it's not obvious. I don't think it's the thing that jumps out at me. The thing that jumps out at me is making toffee. Straight up raisins and molasses, raisin heavy fruitcake. Yeah, super raisiny, super figgy, datey. It's like all those dried fruits. They, with both Pedro Ximenez, which I mentioned at the beginning, which is one of the sweeter styles, and Muscatel, they let the grapes ripen a super, super long time. They are going for an incredibly ripe grape. So not that the grapes themselves are actually raisinated. They're not. This is not like Vinsanto in Italy. But they go for that really ripe style. And then the addition of that arope is what gives it that like real dried fruit flavors. Prune, totally. Like all of those brown fruits. We never talk about the brown fruits, but that is kind of what they are. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think it just smells so fantastic. Mm. And I won't say that obviously it doesn't have anywhere near the acidity of the Fino, but it is a super balanced wine, I think, for how much sweetness that it has. It's not just gloppy. It's not just like, too syrupy. I think it's quite lovely and balanced. Poured on top of vanilla ice cream for sure. Absolutely. Like in my mind, when I was thinking of food pairings, I was just thinking of a tarte tatin with, like an upside down caramelized apple tart with ice cream, and then just, a little sip, maybe a little pour over. I think it would just be absolutely fantastic. Is anybody really not digging this? I'm curious. Not as sweet as we thought it would be, and definitely some nice acidity. Exactly what I was going to say. I was expecting syrup texture, but it somehow has a lightness. I agree. I think that it's just such a pleasant surprise, because it hits on those flavors that you really tend to only get with things that are cloying. And so it's really lovely to get to taste those flavors in a slightly like purer way, if that makes sense, or like, the sugary sweetness isn't getting in the way. What do others think? On our train of how long will things last, even the wine professionals say this will last a month or two. So it'll like really last. Like you got plenty of time. You've got a dark winter coming your way, and this will help you through. I think only one person said that they have sherry a few times a year or more. So if you're now like, okay, so I've never had it, or I rarely have it, and now I have 3 open bottles of sherry, what the hell do I do with it? I think that with the Moscatel Especial, you just pour yourself like a little tiny smidge every night before bed for a little while, and you'll be so happy. Maybe a bite of dark chocolate is there. It's gonna really make your day. It's gonna be great. There's an herbal thing going on too. Maybe lavender, some resinous herb. I like it. I like it. Yeah, I think lavender is really spot on. I often get a lavender note in Moscato and sweeter styles of Muscat that I've had. So I think that it's there. It's not quite pine, right? It's not quite like rosemary, but yeah, I think that's very astute. So I know that I poured you something unusual for the last one, but I will say that if you like this, you can definitely try Muscatel. It's not necessarily going to be quite as dried fruit as this, but it will still kind of hit on some of the same flavors and aromas. It's still aged in oak, it's still oxidized, it's still like caramely, toffee. There'll be some of that kind of raisin thing. It just won't be quite as concentrated as this guy. Alexis is here, but not drinking along, apparently. Not drinking sherry. Listening, but not drinking, and I wanted to decide which one bottle seemed like we'd like the most from all the things I've heard, leaning towards the last one. Interesting. It is the sweetest of the bunch, but it's like a perfect dessert wine. It's not too sweet. It would be great with both dessert or cheese plates, depending on kind of like what your vibe is, what kind of sweet person you are. I think it's kind of dessert in and of itself, so that's cool. We've been trending that way the last few months. It's been fun to explore. Super cool. Then try it, because Cesar Florido is really renowned as the Muscatel specialist in Jerez. Like it's not as common to do Muscatel as it is to do Pedro Ximenez. And so people really like hold up Cesar as kind of the man. So I think it's really cool. Like the 3 wines that we have, El Maestro Sierra is known for their cooperage and their barrels, and then also the fact that their woman run is completely unheard of in Jerez. And then Lustau is kind of this like, I don't know, really into creating a culture of sherry around the world. So they do this amazing job of making all of these styles, teaching people about them, passing on kind of the knowledge to other people. They're kind of, that's their thing. They want people to fall in love with sherry. And then Cesar is like, yep, I'm doing Muscatel. That's my jam. That's what I'm doing over there. Mike mentioned that the mouthfeel reminds him of ice wine. I agree with you, but I think that was actually what I was expecting more of, that ice winey, viscous feel that I think it gets towards that, but it's not quite as much about like a blanket as ice wine. And I say that with the utmost love because I adore ice wine when it's well made. I think ice wine is fantastic. So yeah. I'm really curious what people liked the most. I think they're so incredibly different from each other. But I'd be super open to hearing what everybody's favorites are. If you feel like sharing. I'll just sit here waiting. I mean, I guess I'll talk a little bit. It's a little weird to be just sitting in complete silence. Guys, can we just talk for a hot second about what it's going to be like when I teach a class in person again? It's going to be so weird. I feel like I'm going to be all punchy. I don't even know what I'm going to do. Okay, let's see. Patty's the Lustau. Kristen, she's sticking with sweet for Sherry. Great. Cynthia and Damon are both 3, 2, 1. Well, I think we knew you weren't going to be Fino when you said it tasted like a basement, but I'm glad. Something between the Muscatel and the Amontillado. Aha. All right. I'm coming back to that for a second in a second, Mike. Katya would pick the Amontillado, but she didn't love that. Drew's ranking is Fino, Muscatel, Amontillado. Oh, curious. The Amontillado is the least. So what I'm picking up there is that Katya didn't really enjoy the sherries. Am I picking up on that correctly? Correct. You didn't like any of them. That's a bummer. I'm sorry. It's not for everybody, I guess. I have a customer who does a dessert wine every month. He lets me pick any dessert wine I want for him. And his only guidance is that it not be sherry. He'll drink literally anything, any port, any Madeira, any orange muscat, anything. But boy, oh boy, does he not want it to ever be sherry. She says, okay, she's glad you tried them. Great. I'm glad. And Drew, good luck drinking all that sherry. Maybe you have to, I don't know, give it to some friends. Yeah, let me know. Let me know how that goes. Cameron and Danielle, number 2 is probably the one we all agree with here at our house, but I think 2 and 3 make me appreciate number 1 even more. That's cool. I like that a lot. I think that, we had to start with Fino because it's dry and it's light. And if we tasted them in any other order, it'd be super weird. But I understand that Fino is probably the most challenging of the flavor profiles. So, to go back to Mike's comment about something between the Muscatel and the Amontillado, you're in luck, friend, because there are styles in between these things. These are not the only 3 styles. So Oloroso, which I will put in the chat, is the style that is sweeter than Amontillado, not quite as sweet as the dessert styles. It tends to have some of that kind of like almost salty caramel, right? It's like caramely, but not in a super sweet way. It's really amazing with, if you're a meat eater, it's really amazing with venison, duck, those kinds of more, gamey flavors. It's really great with that, but it can also transition again to cheese and dessert. So Oloroso would be one to try. And then Pale Cortado would be another one to try. It's a little bit drier, but it might also just for you to try. Those might be kind of styles that are your thing. So they're not, they're sweeter than Amontillado, but they're not as dry as Muscatel. Or I'm sorry, they're not as sweet as Muscatel. Awesome. If people are interested in trying more by the glass, the Heights restaurant typically has 3 or 4 different dessert wines by the glass. Oh, that's cool to know. I know that the owner of Maduro, Brian Halsinger, is like just a total sherry nerd. And at least in the past, Maduro tends to have a lot of open sherries. So it might be worth kind of checking that out. In the before times, we would have a fortified wine on by the glass at all times, and often it would be a sherry. But I don't know that people would necessarily come in for fortified wine right now. I might put the Amontillado by the glass. You never know. It's winter. You don't know what people are going to be up to. All right, we're almost at time. So thank you guys. I hope that you enjoyed your sherry experience. I hope that you found something that at least was kind of appealing, unless you're Katja and then meh, you didn't. But you love other wines, and that's okay. Thank you guys. It was really a pleasure. I love talking about sherry. I mentioned at the beginning that there's blind tasting class at the end of November. And then I am undecided. People have been asking. I am undecided about in-person versus virtual come this winter. My child is getting vaccinated on Saturday, which I think is a mindset shift that I'm not even really sure how it's going to change things. So thank you guys. Yeah, yay. So I might decide that if people want to gather together in person, we'd have to show our vaccination cards, and we might be able to do something in person in 2022. So stay tuned for that. And if you have input, I'm totally open. I would love to kind of know what everybody's comfort levels are. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll see y'all again soon. Good night.